Now, Scott, you've told us in the past how the government is somewhat like the Wizard of Oz with a man behind the curtain, and I think we may have seen that curtain pulled back just a bit yesterday as we observed Robert Mueller's testimony. He seemed more like a geriatric Alzheimer's patient than a crack investigator, or perhaps he is a crack investigator, but he's been hitting the crack pipe a little too much. Scott, what's your impression of what we heard yesterday?
Well, I think you nailed it, Jason. I think you nailed it on the head. This was such a comedy of errors coming to a climactic fizzle. It was just too good to be true. The Wizard of Oz analogy is perfect. We've been saying that, and here they do the perfect rendition of the old man behind the curtain, and he comes across as a stuttering, stammering Homer Simpson father type.
Yeah.
What's my name? He was just gone, and people were amazed. I was delighted. I was hooting out loud. I was so rejoiceful because it wasn't, some poor old man who I don't feel quite apologetic towards because of the blood that he's got on his hands from the past and the cover-ups of potential 9/11 and all that other jazz that he's done in his long-winded career of corruption. But he's harmed some people in very profound evil ways, from Manafort to Jerome Corsi to Roger Stone to all of the people that were, run over by this out of control crazy bus, and James and Joanne Moriarty as well.
Right.
And I think this was a very great day because it really put to death the final Democrat theory, fantasy, propaganda, lie that this whole Russia hoax was anything in the first place. It was all nonsense, and Mueller was talking nothing but nonsense. It was just a train wreck, and I think it came across like that. I think everybody knew it. Now you're going to see, I think, today, the lamenting, the bleeding, the wounding, and then you're going to see the Democrats again try and shift attention to other things. Whether it's Iran or conflict, which I don't think Trump's going to fall for that. Trump was at his best yesterday too, when he has his back against the wall, but he's even better when he smells blood in the water. And he was coming at them like Ahab thrusting the spear into the side of Moby Dick, damning them all to hell. I've been chasing them, and finally I have them now. There's nothing there. This was all a lie. Weissman, I think, is going to be grilled unlike any human being has ever been grilled before.
Have they
because
announced
they all see now
that Weissman will appear before the committee?
No, I don't think they've announced that yet, but I think I think the Republicans are going to want that. I don't think the Democrats are even going to allow this to come up again. I think they're going to run away from it, because each time they do this, every American says, you know what, there's nothing there. Why are we still talking about this? I want to talk about other things, whether it's my kids' soccer games or, my taxes or conflict or war, things like that. So I think the Mueller investigation and all that it entailed has come to a screeching halt. And Mueller the sad thing is this: Mueller really was a caricature of what people thought he was going to be. They had heard about this legendary, Obi-Wan Kenobi knight, and here you've got just, again, Homer Simpson's father just completely drooling out the side of his mouth.
Scott, let me keep you away from any kind of I don't want to insult him. Although his performance was worthy of all the derision that you're giving it, I want to stick to a little bit more of an analytical view, because he refused to answer any substantial question. I think we've got some good insights into exactly why Robert Mueller didn't want to testify initially. Perhaps the reasons are not what we might have anticipated, but there was some shocking, I mean, he really appeared totally unfamiliar with the facts of the case. I think there's little doubt remaining that Robert Mueller was the actual lead investigator, and frankly, I question if he's even read the report. They mentioned Fusion GPS, and he said, like, I never heard of them. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, that was timely. That was revealing. That was pulling back the curtain right there, because you're right. The American people and the American culture and the American news media as well have invested so much time into creating this tapestry of lies and confusion and half truths, and then the other side has dedicated so much time to untangling them and compartmentalizing and pulling these things apart. And you're seeing where there's no connection on this part with the Russia indictments in Washington, D.C. There's no evidence that's been presented that links the Russian media center to the hacks or allegations that the Mueller report has established. You claim evidence, but then when you're called into court, you don't provide any evidence.
Right.
So you can't have it both ways. And that's where people are now seeing. You put all this stuff up, you've made all these accusations, and then you don't have the truth or the facts to back it up. And then when we ask you about it, Mr. Mueller, you refuse to answer. And I was pissed off, really, to an extent, because I thought, you are not there to do what you want or answer what you want or not. You are before the people of the United States of America in the hall of Congress, the people's house. You have a duty to answer every single question that is posed to you. If you need to do some things in closed session, fine. But you are here to determine whether this investigation is real or not. If it's a political ploy, or if it's a real national security piece of analysis and legal thought, and not some propaganda, not some Fusion GPS or Hillary Clinton document or Christopher Steele fabrication with British intelligence, not all of these entrapments with FBI informants, not this Peter Strzok and Lisa Page romantic fantasy of we're going to stop them with the insurance policy. We want to know all of these things, because the rhetoric stinks to high heaven, and he didn't answer, he didn't provide. He was a dittering, slobbering sort of
he basically asked
ill-prepared person.
He asked them to repeat almost every question he was asked, which, I mean, again, without insulting the guy, it calls into question, obviously, if someone is an investigator, you need someone who has exceptional perception skills, someone whose vision and hearing and memory are clear. I mean, those are prerequisites. In order for someone to be an exceptional investigator, I would think we would want this guy to, there's people that you meet, Scott, who are immediately sharp, witty, together. I mean, when you and I first met, there's certain things that you pick up about somebody. You didn't appear dazed, you didn't appear out of it or anything like that. And again, I don't want to insult Robert Mueller, but I think we need to actually question what he's doing there. Given what we saw yesterday, I think the whole investigation comes under new scrutiny now, because the leader of it was so unfamiliar with key facts.
Yeah.
It brings me back to this October 2018 report from True Pundit, in which a congressman detailed Robert Mueller's excessive drinking during the workday. I think we are dealing with an alcoholic, and it's time for us to discuss this in a serious, open, and public manner. If this is a guy who's drinking during the day, during the workday, that is totally unacceptable, totally unprofessional, totally not the way a reliable and comprehensive investigation can be conducted. And I do believe that what we saw yesterday on Capitol Hill was a huge victory for Donald Trump and his supporters, and should trigger an investigation into the competency of Robert Mueller's investigation and his staff. Not a single answer that Robert Mueller gave yesterday was satisfactory in my view.
Yeah. Well, people expected as you described, a hard-charging, sharp, analytical, bold, fearless, and ferocious shark. they expected a shark to come in there and say, and with absolute confidence and black knight, just focused attention and energy to go in there and say, let me tell you what this was all about, Congressman. Let me tell you, this is what I saw. This is what I sensed. This was false. I couldn't prove this, but there's something wrong. So you better dig deep. They wanted to hear that kind of a bold, confident person coming in with an axe to grind that, I have some other tools I wanted to use, but I couldn't. The Democrats were praying for that. The Republicans were fearful that that would happen, so they were preparing. And then what you have come in is Don Quixote. He comes in just totally oblivious, totally out there. Yeah, he sounded like he was drunk or he was on a statin drug or he's on something. But aside from his incompetency, it totally took the wind out of everything. It was like letting out a balloon in slow motion. And people were just saying the words, this is painful to watch.
Even the New York Times,
what is this? Who is
Scott, even the communist publication, the New York Times, described his performance as labored, features a very unflattering photograph of what looks like a defeated man, not the strong leader of the FBI. I mean, you brought up 9/11. It seems perhaps we should question every investigation Robert Mueller has ever been involved with, because if he's an alcoholic who's able to be this functional at his age, I mean, how old is Robert Mueller? 60-something, 70?
No, he's in his 70s. He's probably in his mid-70s, I think.
All right. So, I mean, obviously the guy's been drinking for a while. When did it start? And what was his drinking? Did that play any role in his failure to properly investigate 9/11? Or to...
Of course it does.
Yes. So these are questions that people should be asking. But, the one thing you're saying that I might not totally agree with is that people don't seem universally convinced that this is the end of Robert Mueller. We still have the CNNs and the Rachel Maddows and Gerald Nadler, of course. They're focusing on this collusion thing, and they're harping on the report's failure to exonerate the president. How is Gerald Nadler and the lunatic lefty media rewriting not just the Constitution, but the entire notion of criminal justice in the United States, whereby a prosecutor must exonerate someone who's been wrongly accused by a document with no evidence? There's been no interview with these two Russian prostitutes who allegedly urinated, and the guy doesn't even know who Glenn Simpson or Fusion GPS is.
Yeah. Well, what the Democrats have been doing and are doing and will continue to do is to distort completely this entire process into not a legal instrument or a legal process, but a political show, a political process, an emotional show. This isn't about facts. This isn't about logic or reason. This isn't about systems and investigation and filters and processes of taking things to court and having them vetted and vetting the vetters and none of that. It's all about emotion, and the Democrats are not going to be able to change. I've said it before, they are like Nebuchadnezzar, who sent out to eat grass for 7 years. They have lost their mind, and I don't say that flippantly. They really have entered this very weird mental cloud or tunnel that they just can't escape. They're so consumed by a multitude of factors. And it's important to recognize this. I saw this with a guy that I was communicating with yesterday about the Iran conference and what's going on with Iran and all this other stuff. And I said, perhaps we ought to really think about, re-understanding this and postponing things because of this Mueller thing that just happened. This is huge. I've had people telling me who are close to the White House, Scott, this whole Iran conference needs to be postponed because of all the pressure that's happening with the Mueller thing. And I put that out there. And one of the I won't name his name, but one of the people who went to this conference is sort of a left wing guy in New York. And his response was telling, Jason, because he said exactly what the left is going to say. Oh, there's no reason to do anything. This event yesterday, this hearing is going to totally work against Trump. It's going to, I'll read you what he said. It's quite taking. Trump is on the defense now. Postponing doesn't make any sense. He's not going to change. Trump's not going to change. Mueller's testimony hurt him, not the Dems. And I thought, are you in the same universe as I am? Are you
Yeah,
watching the same thing?
right.
Because every person that watched this came away with this helped Trump, this hurt the Dems. The Republicans sort of got a fresh wind in their sails again. Republicans are somewhat incompetent when it comes to this sort of political battle. They're a bunch of nice bankers and cocktail drinkers, but they're not used to the blood and guts gore of ferocious political fighting, which the Democrats are. But this whole hearing was only in favor of Trump. So the left gets they can't even face it. They can't understand this. They don't want to understand it. They're so wrapped up in this moral crusade to stop a quote perceived Hitlerian figure of Donald Trump. They're so wrapped up in their virtue signaling and this sense of being Robin Hood almost to open the borders and let in the free starving people with their swaddling babes and all these other things that the environmental religion, let's all wear burlap and eat squirrels and create an America without gas and all this stuff. These things are affecting the Democrat mind in very weird, profound ways. Here's the walkaway, though. Trump, I think, was right. This is going to hurt the Democrats in 2020. Most young people under the age of 50, 55 are all looking at these old men as the ruin of America because of what we've seen since 2016. They recognized Hillary Clinton was the ruin of America. The only reason that they voted for Donald Trump was because he came in on a white charger saying, to hell with the Republican Party. I want us out of the Middle East. I want to change America, make America great. I'm going to deal with China. I'm going to deal with Iran. I'm going to make friends with Russia. I'm going to make NATO pay their fair share and whip these Europeans or get the hell out. Everybody said, yep, I'm on board with all that. We're tired of this world, America governing the world and being the policeman of the world. Now, he has not done as much as he could have, or perhaps he's not done the right way. I'm not going to go into critiquing all of the stuff he's done, how he's done it, when he's done it. But he's left people hanging and fallen short in a lot of ways. However, that being said, he's in a better position to win 2020 to complete and continue that agenda as long as he doesn't fall into the trap of starting a war or starting something because that could change everything against him. He loses one ship and thousands of American lives. Everybody forgets the good and focuses on the war and then votes for the peace candidate. So I don't think that's going to happen, but he is in a great position to win 2020.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to share with you some of the comments here from the live chat, Scott. People are curious to know who is Robert Mueller accountable to. Also, we're being told that he's going to be 75 on August 7th. And I mean, that's fine. I was just with David Hawkins in Vancouver. A lot of people saw those videos. David's 75, sharp as a tack, one of the smartest guys I know. Keeps up with me when we're walking in the heat and all that. He didn't show up having had 3 Manhattans for breakfast or whatever. I mean, Robert Mueller literally stammered. He seemed clueless. He was like somebody who hadn't studied for the test. Definitely not someone who had a command of the material that he was dealing with there. People are speculating if this was Weissman, if this was Rosenstein. Who was behind this, Scott? Rosenstein did advise President Trump with regard to firing James Comey and then seemed to use that as ammunition against Trump through these third parties like Mueller. I can't help but see remarkable similarity in that tactic as compared to the tactics being used by social engineers against me. FBI informants and whoever approach me as friends, give me information that we report on in good faith, and then they say, oh, look, Jason reported false information from X, Y, or Z. It's the same sort of thing. And in the same exact way, if this were true, if an allegation were true, it would seem that the longer you investigate it, the longer you drill down on it, the more information you would learn, the stronger the hypothesis becomes. But in the case of social engineers who are attacking me, who I will answer 1 week from yesterday in court in Virginia, in striking similarity, they stick to the same talking points. They just keep hammering the same talking points. If Robert Mueller had presented some sort of testimony from eyewitnesses, if he had presented video footage of Donald Trump entering a hotel in Moscow with two young women, where is this evidence? What kind of investigation is this?
Yeah. And the other thing that they mentioned was, why didn't you investigate, or why didn't you question Christopher Steele?
Right. Outside of his purview, he said.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what was flabbergasting, are to these, some of them have been very articulate. Gates from Florida is quite articulate. Jordan is good. I think they were really the stars of a lot of this. And you had some other ones up there too. Gomer wasn't bad. And you know, just sticking to what they said, what they did
Collins.
in this hearing, forgetting that, yeah. And they drill down on the core elements, like what about Steele, and what about all this intelligence stuff? What about these entrapments? What about all this other stuff? And he was oblivious. He wouldn't answer anything. He couldn't answer anything. And it was like going to an old folks home, and the guy's totally out of it with senility, Alzheimer's, and dementia, with a couple, three martinis in him at the same time. And people are just going, this is, you know, I don't want to beat this dead horse. I don't want to insult this old man. I don't want to ruin him. But then again, look what this old man has done to these people's lives. They've been thrown in jail. Manafort has had his whole life turned upside down for taxes and financial stuff that was totally unrelated to Trump. And this is the United States government and Captain America's Justice Department going after to right the wrongs of these terrible criminals like Manafort. That is the biggest bunch of bullshit. And Mueller unleashed all of that. Yes, he had Weissman, the Enron lawyer, and Rosenstein, and
well, it's all the same crew
who
who was there on Enron,
it's
right?
all the same crew. And he admitted this, Jason. He said, "Oh, I didn't know anything about these people until after they came on."
That's not true.
So he said all these people that had animus against Trump, he had no clue until after they came on.
Who he's worked with years before on involved investigation. I mean, that's like me saying, I didn't know that you don't like Hillary Clinton. That's literally exactly like that. I hire you to investigate Hillary Clinton. Now, Scott, the boy 26, he's joining us from Philadelphia. He raises an interesting point. He's saying Jim Jordan praised William Barr like Barr is actually going to charge these traitors. The boy 26 feels that William Barr is a false prophet. You know, you and I have been a bit sort of back and forth on William Barr, didn't trust him at first, curious that he seems to be upholding the law. There's this new wrinkle that's been introduced with regard to William Barr in the Jeffrey Epstein case, where it seems that Bill Barr's father was a headmaster at the Dalton School, where, you know, it's unclear if he hired Epstein or if he left and the next guy hired Epstein, but there's a weird concentration of people working at a high school who are interested in having sex with 14-year-old girls. What is going on with William Barr's father being there?
Well, it doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. There's something funny there. Barr, we don't know. There are some peculiarities about Barr. First of all, he was appointed by George Bush Sr., right? Back in 1990 or whatever.
CIA
Anybody
lawyer.
who was appointed by... Yeah, and George Bush Sr. was a dirty character. All sorts of allegations of his involvement with the Kennedy assassination back in Dallas, to, of course, the Panamanian banks and the drug running operations in Noriega, all of that stuff, and also being related to Hinckley, the attempted assassin of Ronald Reagan. George Bush Sr. has a lot of dirt behind him, besides the pedophilia accusations and weird things there.
Well, that's what I wanted to raise. That's what I wanted to raise with you, Scott, because that's something that is not discussed often enough with regard to George H.W. Bush. And there was pretty extensive reporting by the Washington Times, including credit card receipts of homosexual prostitution ring where
Yes.
young male, I mean, they call them prostitutes, but these are actually enslaved teenage boys who are taken from their broken
Yes.
homes and trafficked into
Yes.
sexual servitude. And
Yes.
this went right to George H.W. Bush. This thing got buried. A lot of people are talking about Epstein being found sort of semi-strangled in his cell. I know you're not necessarily directly familiar with federal procedures in the Southern District of New York, but that MCC detention center, as I understand it, every cell in it is solitary confinement. So what is going on with Jeffrey Epstein attempting suicide or allegedly being almost hung? A lot of connections that haven't been fleshed out yet.
Well, if he's probably done that to himself. He's probably grabbed himself by the throat and put himself into a fetus position, pretending. I don't think he's been attacked by anyone. Just
You don't
because
think
of the
the
security
guards
of
could
the
be paid to kill
location.
him?
Oh, certainly they could. Certainly they could. But like Whitey Bulger was hit a certain way. I think. I don't know if he's actually been hit. It certainly would make sense if he's got a lot of dirt on a lot of people and stuff like that. But if he was of enormous value, he would be absolutely protected. He'd be put in the hole, is what they called it. You'd be put in solitary confinement. You wouldn't get out. That's what they did to Manafort. You put him in the hole. You put him in solitary confinement. He gets out 1 hour a day to walk by himself to get a little exercise, and then he goes back in his cell and he reads books and he gets fed bologna sandwiches and old apples. He doesn't do anything more. So Epstein's confinement is torturous, but at the same time he's protected. So that's what leads me to believe that this thing may not have happened the way they're
Well, they'd be
trying to put it up
monitoring
there.
him and cautious that he doesn't hurt himself if they wanted to protect him, right? They
Right.
wouldn't give him any
Well,
ropes.
if you're on suicide watch, that's essentially sleep deprivation because they come in every couple hours and knock on your window and look at you and keep the lights on to make sure you're not strangling yourself by a
Right.
bed line or bed sheet.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing
Now,
seems.
the other thing we've said about this, though, too, Jason, that warrants, the strategic outline of this whole long-term plan needs to be, yeah, you're taking in Barr. Okay, is he going to do anything? Is he any good? Is he going to prosecute? I don't think he can escape from this because all of this stuff, it's like a dam that's breaking. It's pouring out, and people are looking. And this was the destroying of the Democrat attack. They've got no gun. They've got no powder in their musket anymore. They are completely empty of ammunition. There's nothing there but a bunch of screaming lunatics. So people are just kind of writing them off. And now they're looking at Barr. Now they're looking at the Horowitz. Now they're looking at how is this going to be counterattacked? How are you going to actually dissect it and present in a legal argument all of the allegations that we've seen and heard you present on Fox News with Hannity, the idiot cheerleader who's up there constantly baffling and babbling about this stuff. You do have some very intelligent people who have been on Hannity, such as the guy who wrote the Russia hoax, Jared, whatever his name is, the lawyer. You've had some other reporters up there, Solomon and the other gal. Tucker's had some good people up there. So people are saying, okay, we've heard about all this stuff, but now how are you going to prosecute it? And one of the things they need to prosecute too is Renee Alexander Acosta. Let's return to that for a moment. Acosta was the U.S. Second District Attorney, the federal attorney in Florida that prosecuted Brad Birkenfeld, the Union Bank of Switzerland case, claimed to get $780 million and cut a deal with the banks, a non-prosecution agreement. What Acosta did not say was none of that financial intelligence was shared with the U.S. military that were dealing with terrorist financing. The 15,000 bank accounts that were not examined contained billions of dollars, and that the whistleblower, Brad Birkenfeld, was the only person who was thrown in jail because he had all of this information and a lot of other information that would have fingered people very high up in the U.S. government, high up in the Hollywood community, high up in the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton State Department and the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, Loretta Lynch. So Renee Alexander Acosta cut a deal, conspired with Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Hillary Clinton to bury the UBS terrorist financing, offshore accounts. And that's something that everyone has in Washington that means anything, especially the man in the big house. And that needs to be used to make Acosta sing both about Epstein and all of these other deep state operations. So Acosta needs to be part of this, part of this questioning, interrogation, and prosecution. He was not just the guy who gave Epstein the sweetheart deal. And the other thing about Epstein is there a foreign agency, foreign country intelligence wrapped up with this honeypot operation? Most likely. That's what they do.
The Epstein honeypot operation, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of
Epstein
indications that Epstein is linked to Mossad, but it's not as simple as Mossad put Epstein in there. It seems to be a collaborative operation with the blessing of the United States, whether that's the CIA or something else. And this is how they operate, isn't it, Scott? They want cutouts. They don't want to say, oh, Jeffrey Epstein is a CIA agent. They want to be able to say, hey, if this collapses, we want several levels of removal so we can say, oh, well, this is a foreign Israeli operation, and they'll, whenever they do these kind of clandestine operations, there's multiple levels of people to be burned before it gets to the real perpetrators, right?
Well, see, and that's the last time I checked, the CIA and all the instruments of national power were designed to fulfill the Constitution of the United States. So when the CIA or the FBI or the Department of Justice tells Rene Alexander Acosta back away because he belongs to intelligence, that's the U.S. government, the U.S. intelligence agencies telling Rene Acosta allegedly, you back away from this guy. We're the U.S. intelligence community. We're telling you to back away because he belongs to us. He's being influenced by us, or he's influencing us. He's doing something. So we're going to allow these little girls to be raped and traumatized and treated like chewing gum. We're going to allow him to continue to run honeypot operations and do all sorts of other things. Who knows how many girls may have been killed in these sacrificial blood things or weird stuff that they do.
Right.
We haven't even opened up that clown box yet. But the U.S. intelligence community telling Acosta therefore becomes legally liable, culpable for lawsuits by people to say, you, Mr. CIA director, told the Department of Justice to back away from this pedophile. You violated my constitutional rights, my daughter's rights. You denied us due process for your political corruption. You are aiding and abetting this conspiracy and this crime. You are guilty by association and by racketeering, by conspiracy. You're guilty, Mr. CIA. Whoever talked to Acosta and told him to back off, I'm sorry, I want more detail from that Acosta.
Right, exactly.
That's why I want his ass dragged to court. I want to know exactly who told you to back off, when they told you, in what form. I want this whole thing laid out, because this is the beginning of that red brick road to hell and death that we've been seeing and trying to assemble, that leads right to the suffering of these little girls. And it goes through Acosta, it goes through Epstein, and it goes through Clinton, it goes through all these people. And now you're telling us it goes through intelligence. Well, there's a lot of things that need to be understood. So I think Acosta needs to be and I wouldn't be surprised if he's killed, Jason, but he needs to be the guy that Trump sequesters and has him sing in protective custody, because he can give up a lot. He can give up a lot of the bodies, as can Julian Assange and Brad Birkenfeld, Edward Snowden, and myself and the others who have played different parts in this symphony. This is the thing. This is all coming from different parts at different times in different angles, but it's all part of the deep state cover-up, the deep state corruption. The other thing is, we've mentioned before, the Tom Hamburger and the Michael Isikoff component. Mr. Mueller, Michael Isikoff, and Tom Hamburger, and all of these weird, looks like CIA Mockingbird assets. Did you talk to them? Did you investigate them? Did you ask them? Of course, he would say no, or I can't remember, or what's my name?
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be all that he can say. But it's a good point that you raise, because obviously Michael Isikoff was pivotal. His reporting in Yahoo News was used to sort of buttress the information from the urination dossier, the Russian urination dossier, and basically he was a key component in proliferating the story to the American public. And forgive me, Scott, I have failed to mention that if people are seeing you here on Crowdsource the Truth for the first time, my guest Scott Bennett is the author of Shell Game. He is a former Army psychological operations specialist who was involved in a detailed investigation into terrorist financing, and Scott discovered links between the Union Bank of Switzerland, our clandestine agencies in the intelligence community, and contractors to the government, including Booz Allen Hamilton, the Shalala family, the Zackheim family, all kinds of really troubling connections, things that actually should be investigated. And Scott and his colleagues have already investigated, basically handed a comprehensive report to the people in the government who have just ignored it, while we spend millions of dollars, hundreds and thousands even of hours listening to apparently drunk, incompetent traitors like Robert Mueller, who have failed to investigate the most devastating crimes in the history of the United States. Robert Mueller is not a hero. Robert Mueller is a traitor to this country. Robert Mueller should not be thanked for his service. He should be shunned and penalized and prosecuted for his traitorous disservice to this country. And I want to take you back to Alexander Acosta for a moment, Scott, because am I incorrect to say that it was just remarkably conspicuous that Acosta resigned one day after this stunning revelation that Epstein was intelligence? It feels like someone has forced him to resign. They obviously didn't want him telling the public that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's where Acosta is going to be pinched. Did somebody really tell you that? Did somebody in intelligence tell you that, or are you making that up? It's a very easy lie to quickly say in the moment, impulsively say, "Oh well, I was told to back off because he was intelligence." Well, who told you that? And if it's proven that no one told him that, then Acosta is in the intelligence world. Acosta is linked. And we know Acosta was linked because he was directly linked to Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Landy Brewer, Loretta Lynch, and Tim Geithner, and Stuart Eisenstadt, and Covington and Burling, and Dov Zackheim's son, Roger Zackheim. All these people were linked to the Brad Birkenfeld Swiss bank case. Therefore, Acosta was linked to it. And all of the money that Hillary Clinton, the 15,000 bank accounts that went totally missing, that were extorted, that were stolen, all of that money used in black operations, whether it's Libya or Ukraine or Syria, bags of money for Saudi and Qatari, Wahhabi terrorists that came in and that were cutting up kids and putting them in the fridges of people in Libya. All of that stuff was money that came from CIA sources. So Acosta, in his role in the Swiss bank case and cover-up, is sort of the tip of the iceberg. He needs to be dragged out and laid out just on this issue alone. And that intelligence connection may also have direct connection to Epstein, if there were Swiss bank accounts, if he was a UBS holder, if that's where part of the nexus and the connection is Epstein, UBS, Hillary Clinton. Then we start to see the other dimensions of connectivity here.
Right.
So I think it's all going to continue to come out.
I agree with what you're saying, that all of these things are connected, and that that Mueller is playing a role here. You raise an excellent point that Acosta could easily be left out in the cold. Someone in the intelligence community tells you back off from so-and-so because he's intelligence. Obviously, they're going to later say, I never said that. He made that up. He's lying. There's no evidence of that. They love to say that. Even Mueller said something very lawyerly. He said, I forget what he said, but he would not say, he said, did you conclude that the president did not commit a crime, which is like, what kind of question is that? And he said, well, that's what the report said. He would not, positively affirm anything. He just kept referring to the report or saying, I won't answer that, or that wasn't in my purview. Really a dissatisfying lack of transparency. Now, with regard to these things being connected, it was just announced this morning that William Barr has reinstated the death penalty on a federal level, and that 5 child murderers are set to be put to death. This is certainly ominous if you are someone who maybe has a private island that is raping and murdering and burying children. We've heard about a dozen or perhaps several dozen victims who have come forward and said that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had recruited them, and they all describe this sort of Ponzi scheme-like network where they would bring in 14, 15, 16-year-old girls to sort of go to the mall and get other 14-year-old girls who are from broken homes, who need money, who might want $200 to give an underwear massage. But there are quite probably many more victims that we haven't heard from. And on more pain, we've heard testimony from a victim who said that many children were killed in his presence, that they were cut, they were bled out, their blood was consumed. We've got this bizarre temple on the Jeffrey Epstein Island, and someone operating under the name Rusty Shackelford has given us a lot of 4K drone footage, unprecedented views of this island. Rusty has just revealed that there are groundskeepers still there, boats, vehicles. People are on the island maintaining it, keeping it up. Lots of things that don't seem to make sense on this tiny island. There's an ambulance, but no clear presence of a hospital. And obviously, where would you drive in this ambulance from an island? Why do they need an ambulance? A lot of like semi-truck loading docks that are built into hills that would seem, why do we need a loading dock if there's no garage there? It would seem to feed into an underground network of tunnels. We've noticed a very unusual pit on the island that's reminiscent of a pit that David Hawkins and I observed at the Picton Pig Farm. James Alefantis also owns a pig farm. So do we have a network of people that are raping children, drinking their blood, killing them in ritualistic, bizarre, pseudo-religious ceremonies? And does this reenactment of the death penalty at a federal level, coupled with Donald Trump's executive order related to human trafficking, Scott, does this indicate that Trump and his Justice Department are preparing to really take control of this situation and really bring down an iron fist?
Well, if we go that path, which has been the QAnon, the Pizzagate, the allegations of child sexual blood drinking and prostitution, and the Podesta emails and the Obama email suggesting hot dogs and pizza as dietary activities at the White House, which, when you measure next to the policies of the White House, you do not get to fly in food from anywhere.
And why would hot dogs cost $60,000?
Yeah. So this the FBI, the child pedophilia rings, the counter child pedophilia, all identify the symbolic language that's used and the literal language that's used for code. And hot dogs are used as hot dogs and pasta are used to refer, I think, to little boys. Pizza is for little girls. So there are allegations that Obama and others have been engaged in child sexual perversion, exploitation, prostitution, and perhaps a sacrifice. The Pizzagate was a big issue that was raised, and if we go down that path, it certainly makes sense that there's more evidence, there's more material, there's perhaps material on Weiner's laptop. People have talked about videos of Hillary Clinton and Uba Abedin participating in the sexual child sacrifice issue. That may be true. I haven't seen anything like that. But if we go down that path, that all of that is true, then it makes perfect sense that this is the path of prosecution that Trump is and Barr and the rest of them are going to be pursuing. If I mean, they would know about this, Jason, with the technology available in NSA and the military and the CIA. Trump could have his own Praetorian Guard go in and go through and find some stuff that would be evidence of this activity. The grounds of Epstein Island should be scoured.
Right.
By
Why do they have
forensic
gardeners there and
evidence.
not the FBI?
That's right. The whole thing should be yellow taped because they ought to have.
Couldn't they be destroying
blood
evidence right now,
experts.
Scott?
That's right. Well, that's what they would be doing, right? I mean, if you've got anybody down there, that's a crime scene. If this guy's being arrested for
Right.
crimes, that's a crime scene. That's
What's
where the
going
crimes
on?
occurred. So, what is going on? Because you could have blood. You should be going down doing radar technology of the land to determine if you've got
let me
mass
take you
graves.
to the island for a
Anything
second, Scott, because let's look at this temple right here, okay? Epstein, it's a Jewish last name. Jeffrey Epstein is a Jewish guy. Now, he's not walking around in a yarmulke with payas and a robe, so he's obviously somewhat secular if he's practicing Judaism at all. This temple on his island, that's not a synagogue. I don't know what's going on with this temple. And it wouldn't, in my mind, be consistent with someone who does not walk around with a yarmulke, who is not a pious religious Jew. I mean, if you had some billionaire guy who had a giant temple with a Star of David and had his own rabbi, that's another thing. But this is not a Jewish house of worship. This is something else. So what is going on in there? We've seen Rusty Shackelford fly right up to the windows and look in. It looks like there's construction happening. I believe I saw a bed in there in one of Rusty Shackelford's videos. So what the hell is going on there? There seems to be some non-Judeo-Christian religion being practiced in this temple on this island. They've got, these sort of symbols on the ground. There are a lot of sundials, sun worship and the black sun. That ties into a lot of occult religions, human sacrifice. We've heard about underground tunnels. New information indicates that there may be underground tunnels under the Clinton Library. I don't know that we're ready to say that that's for sure yet, but there are rumors that has happened. So there seems to be this, underground network. It's very difficult to know. We're seeing just little pieces of information. What do you think about this temple, Scott?
Well, I don't think it certainly reflects any godly practice of religious participation. So it certainly would seem to be a mock-up. But the sheer horrific accusations of Epstein bringing down, little girls and sexually traumatizing and abusing them for his own lascivious carnal hungers and lusts and perversions, in addition to gathering intelligence and observing and recording the similar practices of people like Bill Clinton that we know is a rapist and a habitual liar. And there's also Prince Andrew allegedly, and who knows how many other of these perverts, these rich perverts, go down and get their jollies off doing something like this. But it seems to be a place that should be absolutely cloaked in forensic FBI or other teams of investigators to determine what exactly is down there. And if they're not doing it yet, it's very, very suspicious.
Right.
But the whole Epstein thing and the other the allegations that they've had in different places, like in California's, what was that, Grove, where they've had similar sexual perversions. This seems to be an emerging reality that maybe has existed for a long time, but because of the internet and the imagery, you're now having exposed unlike at any other time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I agree with you, they should be down there right now, because this is an older image that the dome has already been removed, apparently due to a hurricane. There's a close-up photo of an idol that at one time was on top of the temple here. Difficult to see in this photograph, but it does appear to be an owl. So Moloch, the owl god, is also prominently displayed at the Bohemian Grove that you've just mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's a Luciferian, I'm not directly familiar with the occult association of Moloch, but it's certainly not a Jewish symbol. There are a number of idols, statues, whatever you want to call them, around the island that I have observed in the Rusty Shackelford videos of the island. And, of course, one of the primary tenets of Judaism is that idolatry is strictly forbidden. So even a very secular Jew would not have religious statues and idols. I think that was, the Ten Commandments and Moses or whatever. There were no idols to be worshipped. So it's a definite departure from any kind of Jewish practice to have idols and temples with owls on them and things like this. This aspect of the Epstein case really needs to be delved into much more closely.
Yeah. Well, there's now revelations of Epstein's connection to Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank and UBS have been flirting. So Epstein's money channels, I think, are going to be examined. And that's going to lead, again, his Deutsche Bank, UBS accounts in connection with Renee Alexander Acosta, who ironically prosecuted both Epstein and the UBS case. And Eric Holder's connection to Covington and Burling. He's brought it to light.
You did. CNN's not reporting on that. New York Times is not reporting on that. Scott Bennett brought that to our attention.
Mm-hmm. And it's all going to come out. And Trump has it. And Sidney Powell has it. And Sidney Powell knows it. All of this is going to come out by the weight of the avalanche momentum behind it. And I don't think it can be contained. And the deep state know that. These liars and these criminals know that. We had 8 years of Obama constipation, and Trump is our enema, and it's all coming out, whether we like it or not. Let's let everything be flowed and cleaned, and everything revealed that Obama and Clinton and Holder and all of these criminals were doing at the State Department, the Department of Justice for 8 years. And I think Epstein is going to be part of that revelation. Bill Clinton's going to be dragged in. Bill Clinton could be thrown in jail for this too. Barr, by putting the death penalty, could be sentencing a lot of these people to death. And be advised, keep notice, the left is going to go apoplectic. The only way for them to survive is to go into full revolution mode, which means the Antifa and the far left lunatics are going to set themselves on fire and fly at us like kamikazes. So we have to be prepared for that traumatic battle clash, and I think it's coming because you see that in their absolute denial of this Mueller testimony being anything but destructive. You see that in their religious fanaticism and their environmental worship, and Ocasio-Cortez and this Palestinian woman who's now the one of the congressmen, the Squad, right? The Squad, the four Stygian witches, and Omar. They're up there just spewing hatred and venom and anger and anti-man stuff. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants a part of that. Every American goes, that's disgusting. I mean, I can understand certain sympathies with the traditional Democrat blue-collar platform, but those days are gone, Jason. They don't represent that. They have no connection. They are so full of venom and hatred and revolution and taken over the country by minorities coming up from, illegal minorities coming up and becoming citizens and voters. Right. Without due process,
getting money.
They're
healthcare.
In the stage of revolution.
Yeah, and Scott,
this is the Red Revolution all over again.
Absolutely. Just the other day, Laura Loomer confronted not Ilhan Omar, but Rashida Tlaib, and asked her if she would condemn Antifa violence. She refused to do it. Now, that's really strange because how easy is it for a congressperson to stop and say, look, obviously we condemn any sort of violence, and although we support the principle of whatever it is she supports, acting out violently is unacceptable. It's so bizarre that they refuse to even say something as simple as that, a message that really anyone could get behind. And I do want to remind everyone that they can visit Scott's webpage at shellgamewhistleblower.com. They can purchase Scott's book, Shell Game and read in detail the actual evidence. This is a comprehensive report on an investigation outlining facts and details that will help you gain a new understanding, rather than investigations conducted by people like Robert Mueller, which leave you scratching your head and wondering if the guy actually knows anything or he's just writing fiction books. People can also financially sponsor Scott with the donate button at shellgamewhistleblower.com. It's extremely important that Crowdsource the Truth viewers support the guests that come on the show, particularly whistleblowers like Scott. Scott and the other whistleblowers that we speak to have been actually shunned and, in Scott's case, thrown in jail for revealing this criminality. And I think that the more we see testimony like we saw yesterday from Robert Mueller, from the people who are allegedly enforcing the law, the more we see them obviously lying, the more they put their incompetence on display. And I think every week, Scott, people are seeing your resolve, your confident and competent presentation of information. There's little doubt in my mind who's telling the truth and who has the information we should be responding to. So I hope that people will go to patreon.com/shellgame and sponsor Scott's Patreon page. He's posting all the videos that we do together, as well as all of his other appearances, and he's doing quite a few. So it's a very good page for people to go to and become sponsors of. Scott, we've got just a few minutes left today. What would you like to say to everyone in closing?
Well, I think this is a great time to be really an American. This is a time for truth tellers. The wind's in our sails, and we don't have anything to apologize for. The left are going to go angry, they're going to go violent, they're going to go crazy, but you have to hit a bully right in the nose. And this is the time to hit them all and say, no, there's nothing there. The Mueller thing is fake. The whole Russia hoax is fake. This was your attempt to take over the country. This is your attempt to get back to the Hillary Clinton was elected bull. We're not tolerating that. He's not like Trump, but he's better than anything you could hope for in the meantime. And this is about our country. This is not about Trump. This is about an out-of-control coup d'etat that they tried to do, and it's now fallen flat. Now is the time for the Republicans and others to go on the full attack and hunt them down and really stick the spear right through their heart to say all this stuff is a lie and you are a liar, and be prepared for their madness. That's the only way they can win, Jason, is through violence. That's why this Tlaib woman wouldn't denounce violence, because it's the only way that they can win anything is by bullying and threatening people with violence. Well, when you pick a fight with a conservative and you try and pull violence on conservatives, you're going to lose, because conservatives know how to shoot, they know how to fight, they're not cowards, and they protect their families, where the left are nothing but an individual mob of schizophrenics. And I think their days are coming to an end very quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. So people can go to Laura Loomer's website to check out that video of Rashida Tlaib refusing to renounce the violence of Antifa, which recently threw a chemical milkshake on independent journalist Andy Go, I think his name is. And, I don't know how any reasonable person could avoid denouncing that type of thing. I don't know Andy, but certainly nobody deserves. I think he got a brain injury. They hit him on the head and did all kinds of things that anyone in Congress should be denouncing. So perhaps, I don't know, Scott, for me, that Robert Mueller testimony yesterday was the opposite of helpful for morons like Gerald Nadler, Adam Schiff, left-leaning Democrats. It just did not seem to do what they wanted to do at all. It was as if somebody dusted off Mr. Magoo, dumped a couple of cups of black coffee down his throat and wheeled him in there to have him just, it's unbelievable. Haven't heard as much deflection since the Iran-Contra hearings.
Yeah. You're doing a great job in identifying it and analyzing it, Jason. So I applaud your efforts, and people are getting a good insight from your mind. So please keep it up.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your insights as well. I had initially thought about going to Washington, D.C. to cover the hearing, but it just seemed very clear that I would have had a difficult time getting into that room. I would have had poor quality audio, poor quality video, wouldn't have been able to ask any questions directly of Robert Mueller. So I sometimes am much more interested in rather than breaking news that obviously much more capable news agencies are going to have a leg up on beating me to it, I'd rather just take the time to analyze what's happening, speak to experts like you, and have a sensible conversation about it maybe a few hours later or the next day. I think that we're bringing our audience the insights that they want to see through that method, and there's lots of other places you can go to. C-SPAN's got better coverage of that than I could offer. But Scott, I want to thank you for joining me today. Your insights are incredible. We're going to have to watch to see what happens with Alexander Acosta and the other people related to this Jeffrey Epstein case. I want to thank everybody for watching. I've got a very special guest joining me at 3 o'clock. Going to be Dr. Jerome Corsi, a man who's been the target of the Mueller investigation. He's going to give us his insights into what we saw from Robert Mueller yesterday. People are going to want to tune in for that at 3 p.m. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in just a little bit. Take care, Scott.
Thank you, brother.